all across CNY. It's the 315. Here's Brian Higgins.
All right, rolled along on this Monday. Time to talk a little lax here. In the offseason, we got the news a few weeks ago that Dave Pietramala was leaving as Syracuse's defensive coordinator off to North Carolina, where his twin sons are on the team there to take the same position. So we've been wondering who the next guy would be. The answer is John O'Doerner, the now former head coach of the Manhattan Jaspers. And joining us to talk about it is the guy that broke the story on Friday. He is Ty Xanders of Inside Lacrosse. Ty, welcome in. I do have one bone to pick. You broke the story at like 6:02, and our show ended at 6, so I just had to wait around all weekend to talk about it. So if you could have done it like an hour earlier, we really would have all made out up here.
I know. I think in this world we would have appreciated it more if we could have broken it, a little earlier as well. But, I'm sure there were some sharps about a little Friday news dump, but just the way it happens sometimes.
Yeah, can't always control the time of things, but we're glad to talk with you about it today. So tell Cuse fans what they need to know. Who is John O'Doerner, and why is this the right move here for Gary Gait?
I think it's an awesome hire. I really can't stress that enough. I mean, no matter who you talk to, everyone has good things to say about John O'Doerner. And, knowing him personally, I couldn't, possibly have more, positive thing to say about him. Just a very down-to-earth personality. I've always heard he's kind of a film junkie. And, from a coaching perspective, he's someone who, is like, it's pretty simple. It's a disciplined unit in Manhattan and a system that essentially allows his players to make decisions and make plays. And, doesn't overcomplicate things too much. And, I think going back to his personality, I have no doubt that, his personality is one that will work very well from a recruiting standpoint. I'm a big fan of John's, and, feel very strongly about the direction that Syracuse is heading in a lot of ways. But I think this is a hire that will allow them to, catapult them to the next level because, quite frankly, this seems like a Syracuse team that, on paper, for whatever that's worth, is as talented as any team since they won a national championship. I think hiring someone like John is certainly a big step forward, and I'm excited to see what he can do.
Yeah. I mean, he was head coach of Manhattan this past year. Statistically, they had the number one defense in the country. He was the DC there for a while before that, and they had multiple units that fared very well. I guess one of the big questions here from a Syracuse perspective, Ty, is coming off Dave Pietramala. Like, there's not a much of a bigger, distinct personality in lacrosse. Like, you wanted a Dave Pietramala, you know exactly what you're getting. What kind of switch do you think will be made, A, in personality, and B, in style, going from, a Hall of Famer like Petro to a new guy like O'Doerner?
Yeah, no, it's hard to say. I think, on field, describing Manhattan is simple and disciplined. I know in the past, Coach Pietramala's, defense has been, people like to think that they're complicated with the slide packages and all that. And I would imagine that John will probably stick to his guns and run a pretty similar style to what he ran at Manhattan. But to me, I think that this was a hire, obviously, that really mattered a lot for the future of Syracuse lacrosse. And I feel like off the field, Petro's personality was just the way that he is with his players was just really essential for Syracuse. Him being the guy who's in the office at all hours, watching film with everyone. I think he's someone that Cuse really needed with that staff dynamic. And I think Cuse will certainly welcome a personality and a mentor figure like Coach O'Doerner, with open arms. I think he brings that to the table. The guy who's there for the players in all aspects of life and lacrosse. So I think J.O. accomplishes that. And I really feel like in many ways the sky's the limit for what he can accomplish at Syracuse. Just getting a different caliber of player. He's already got a phenomenal goalie in Will Mark, and now Syracuse has a faceoff guy that will take some pressure off of that defense. So I'm certainly bullish on Syracuse as a whole, and definitely the defense under his command.
Ty Xanders, Inside Lacrosse, is our guest. We're talking about Syracuse hiring John O'Derna as their new defensive coordinator under Gary Gate, and kind of two more ways to go on this here. Ty, one was Petro leaving a few weeks ago. The timing and all of it catches you off guard in the middle of the summer like this. But Petro was never going to be, a lifer at Syracuse. I think we all just assumed he'd leave eventually for a head job. Is this, in your mind, is this just because his kids are Carolina, or is there anything more to it that you saw going down to UNC?
Yeah, no, it was one of those things that was shocking and it wasn't shocking. I think the timing was somewhat surprising, but I think in the back of everyone's mind, and certainly when the rumors began to run wild in mid to late May, the possibility of Carolina making some changes to the staff, I think that people had it in their minds as a strong possibility. Knowing Petro, I don't really know anyone, when I would put Petro and Joe Spalina, right up there, who prioritize and it sounds funny because everyone does prioritize their family, but just prioritizing family and being there for anything and everything family related. And I think that the thought of with his sons on a daily basis was obviously intriguing to him. So when Joe Bresci was able to make it work and they were all able to make it work, I think that he ran for an opportunity. I think I wasn't as much surprised. I was more surprised at the timing, not that this move was made. Because I think, like anyone else, I wasn't sure how long Dave would be at Syracuse, whether that was to go to Carolina as an assistant or get a head coaching job in the offseason. I know that there was, one school that was in contact with him to become a head coach this offseason as well. But, no, it's a tough loss for Syracuse, but a massive gain, massive gain in John O'Derna.
Take me through, Ty. Take me through this from Gary Gates' perspective in your eyes, because there's a wide variety of ways Gary could have gone. He could have gone and tried to find another guy up there with Petro's experience level. We kicked around the John Galloway idea, who's similar to O'Derna in many ways. They're the same age. They were sitting head coaches and all that. Obviously, he's content with what he's got going at Jacksonville right now. But O'Derna, best I can tell, other than in lacrosse, this guy, everyone knows everybody. I can't find any legit connections from Gary to him. So what does that tell you about Gary that he was willing to go outside the family, go outside his comfort zone, and bring in O'Derna here?
Yeah, I think everyone, when this job opened up, and even when Gary got hired as head coach, there was just I'm trying to think of the right way to characterize this and call this. No one really knew what would happen and who he would go after, because he doesn't really have that built-in circle. I think when assistant jobs open up, it's like, all right, well, he played with this guy, or he was on staff with so-and-so. With Gary being on the women's side for so long, I think it makes it hard for people like myself or coaches to be like, oh, he's going to go after this guy because they have this connection. So that makes the list kind of difficult to put together. For the reasons I laid out. But to me, I really feel like I would imagine that Pat March had an impact. I'm not saying that he was the one really pushing this and it was his hire, because it wasn't. But March and O'Derna go back a while and have a great relationship and have that built-in chemistry. I'm not going to speak for Pat or anything, but there's no doubt that when Gary was looking for names, I'm sure that Coach March said, look, this guy's fantastic. Here's his credentials. And they kind of went from there. That's just my hunch. Just given their relationship going back a while, they were the same year of college at Gettysburg and Roanoke. So I'm sure that this is a name that Pat brought up to Gary. And when he conducted interviews, had him on campus and kind of won him over. Would be my best guess.
So Ty Xanders from Inside Lacrosse is our guest here. We're talking Syracuse Lax here today. So Ty, when you broke this news on Friday, I'm not very familiar with O'Derna, so the first thing I do, you Google it up, you click on his bio, and what I wanted to know, and this is your wheelhouse, obviously you handle all the recruiting stuff for Inside Lacrosse. I'm like, all right, where's this guy from? Where's his home base? And he's from Long Island. So I see that, and I'm like, oh man, this makes an extra layer of sense, right, for Syracuse. Recruiting on Long Island had slacked off a little bit over the years. Obviously, Spallina, it's getting back going again. I'd imagine another Long Island connection has to be a huge selling point of what O'Derna can bring, off the field when it comes to recruiting.
No doubt. I think that's big time. And Petro brought that, but I feel like J.O. brings that as well. He's got some outstanding connections on the island. He was living on Long Island as head coach in Manhattan late in his tenure. I would think that pipeline, if you want to call it that, because it feels established at this point with what's in the roster, as opposed to past year's rosters. I think that will only increase. And I kind of said something along these lines on Twitter, but he's just one of the more university-like guys on the circuit and amongst club coaches. There's really not any no one's really ever been critical about him, and he's just a personality that's very easy to be around. And as I mentioned, that'll be big on the recruiting side of things.
Yeah, certainly it'll be helpful. Yeah, the more the merrier when it comes to Long Island guys coming up to Syracuse for sure. And as I said, Ty, you are the recruiting guru when it comes to Inside Lacrosse. I'm still getting used to not saying the Under Armour All-American game, but the New Balance All-American games were this weekend for the guys and the girls in high school. We saw Syracuse recruit Trey Deer was out there with a wooden stick and Alfie Jacques homage again. That was pretty cool. What did you make from this weekend and those games from a Syracuse perspective?
Yeah, no, it was an awesome experience. Trey Deer was certainly high on my list of standouts. Thought he was one of the most 3 or 4 most impressive players in that game. Seeing his chemistry with Owen Duffy, just seeing his off-ball ability and slick hands, and just overall effort. I think I don't think anyone rode harder than Trey Deer. In that first goal, he had a great look from up top and, finished smooth inside. And then second goal, caught across his body and threw multiple fakes and made an unselfish pass, his first assist. He was making plays. He had 2 and 1 on 3 shots, I want to say, and was all over the place. He making plays, on the ride and getting the ball off the ground. And sure, I've felt this way in the past, just watching him as much as I have in the high school season. But going back to watching that game and thinking about what Syracuse has, it's I just don't understand how you don't get this guy in the field, no matter what role that is, whether it's having him with with Owen Hill, throwing him out of the box, whatever it is. His skill set is one that you can't have on the sidelines too often. And I know that there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, a lot of big names and established players, but on the roster and coming on the roster for this year, but and a lot of lefties for sure. But you got to get a skill set like that on the field because he's going to be an important piece of Syracuse lacrosse for 4 years. So you got to utilize that skill set. So it was fun to watch. You can see the joy that he has playing the game and playing with that wooden stick. It was a lot of fun to watch, seeing him and Jake Spleen out there. And Jake, quite frankly, I think it was a role that we didn't expect him to play when we selected him. We selected him as a midfielder, kind of do-it-all guy, and had some players drop from the face-off position due to injury on both sides. So I would have guessed that he maybe would have taken 1, 2, 3 draws and been in the wing for one of them. And, he was out there having to take, I think it was 14, 15 face-offs. And I don't feel like that's going to be his role at the next level. I see him on the wings. I see him playing D-midi and maybe transitioning over throughout his career. I certainly see Johnny Mullen as the guy to face off X in the freshman class, but Jake can do a lot of things well. And and that'll suit him well at the next level.
Yeah, any other names, Ty, we need to know on the recruiting side? I'd say either. Your choice here, that we'll see coming in this year you think will have an immediate impact on Syracuse, or that are starting to stack up for down the line with verbals?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. I think going back to a name like Donnie Scott, I mean, disappointing to see him suffer an injury playing box. I love that he plays box, but to suffer that injury is certainly tough. But I think in a way, it's not the worst thing. I feel like there's a lot of, like, with Figueres returning and some transfers coming in, there's a lot of options defensively that Syracuse has. So I think, like, spending a year recovering and learning the defense and getting acquainted isn't the worst thing, for him. But looking elsewhere in the class, I mean, there's certainly a lot of talent. I mean, I mentioned Johnny Mullen. And, I was really, really impressed with Wyatt Hoddle. I think it might take him some time to see the field. But I thought Hoddle kind of had a breakout or breakthrough season, whatever you want to call it, even though he was no slouch prior to this season. I thought he was one of the most impactful players in the entire league down here in Baltimore. So guys like Hoddle, Tyler McCarthy, I think is an outstanding midi on Long Island. Michael Ippoliti is a stud goalie, help the depth. I mean, there's a lot of very talented 4-stars and 5-stars coming in. And quite frankly, I'm very curious to see how the 25 group shapes up for Syracuse these next few months.
Yeah.
So that'll be pretty interesting with a new piece in JO on staff. I'm very curious to see what Syracuse can do, recruiting the 25.
Yeah, and what is that? That's coming up not too long here, Ty. You know that before we
about
can.
A month, man.
Yeah, exactly. Calendar flips to September, and then we can. Not long after that, you get going with that stuff. I'm sure we'll check in with you then when those names start making their intentions known. But thanks as always for the time. We'll catch up again soon, my friend. Okay.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it, guys.
All right, that is Ty Xanders, Inside Lacrosse. He broke the story on Friday. Again, it's 6:02, but on Friday about John O'Derner, the new defensive coordinator for Syracuse, and he's their recruiting guy. Like, if you go to InsideLacrosse.com and you read about recruiting, more likely than not, you're reading something that Ty wrote. He's at Ty Xanders on Twitter. Do we still call it Twitter? Elon. Yeah, at X. Yeah, come on. All right, we're going to take a break in this hour, brought to you by William Mattar. We've just blown past 444, but if you're hurting a car, call William Mattar at 444-4444. We're back after this. It's QSportsTalk.com, ESPN Radio.